Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I am trying not to use my teacher voice because I have a microphone. So it is a pleasure to be with you this morning. Thank you so much for the opportunity to come and speak. My name is Lisa Ellis. I'm running for South Carolina Superintendent of Education. I am a 21-year veteran of three school districts, Richland 1, Fairfield County, and currently in Richland School District 2 at Blythewood High School. I've taught all levels and electives of English. I've been an instructional coach, which works with teachers. I'm currently the director of student activities, which is an admin, sort of a hybrid role where I spend half the day teaching leadership and service to students and the other half working with students to create and implement school-wide events. I love my job so much. 4 years ago, I created a closed Facebook group called SC for Ed, just as a way for teachers to communicate with each other. You know, even though we're around people all day, it's a very isolating profession. And so this was an opportunity for teachers to collaborate, to talk about the issues. And it turned into a grassroots advocacy movement to fight for placing a high quality teacher in every classroom. It led to us fighting for teachers, working conditions, salary, and all of that, and which has then led me today to running for Superintendent of Education, which I had never thought that I would do. But I am frustrated. I'm frustrated at how our teachers and our students are not receiving what they need. Every student in South Carolina deserves access to a high quality education, and as much as teachers and schools are trying, we're just not really hitting the mark because of the teacher shortage. I'm just going to talk about that for just a minute. This past school year, for a lot of people it's over. Mine, I still have a couple days left, but the students are done. There were 1,121 classrooms without a teacher this year. From August to December, 977 teachers quit, and that's quitting mid-year. SC for Ed just did a report, Mandy, a couple weeks ago when teacher contracts were due, and there are currently 3,700 teacher vacancies across the state. When we talk about how schools can effectively teach children, it is having that high quality teacher in the classroom. And so what I want us to focus on is teacher salary and benefits, but also working conditions. We talk about a teacher's working conditions or a student's learning conditions, and we really owe our students opportunities for success, whatever path they're choosing, and that really is through public education. So that's what I'm here fighting for, and really think that I can make some immediate changes in this role, particularly addressing the working conditions. That's my spiel. I'd love to answer questions if you have them, or just know that I'm working hard for all of the students and then ultimately the teachers and school support staff in South Carolina.
Good morning.
Good morning.
What do you think? What do you think's leading to the teacher? You want to improve those conditions for the teachers. What do you think the problem is, and what is your solution?
Well, there's a lot of problems. I think first and foremost, you really have to think about, if a teacher has a 28-year span of teaching, you've got to look at what is driving early career teachers away. That's salary. When you're looking at a starting salary is $36,000 and a teacher has to choose between paying off student loans, living on their own, all of those things, you can't live that, particularly in your metropolitan areas, you can't live on $36,000. When you're looking sort of later in mid-career, I think it comes to working conditions. We talked about, I think about this past legislative session, and the one good thing the General Assembly did was put into law 30 minutes unencumbered planning for elementary and middle school students. And what we had been hearing from elementary schools teachers for years was that they don't have time during the day to do any planning, even they don't have time to go and deal with their own personal needs like a restroom break. And the fact that we had to put that into law because school districts, once they became aware of it, didn't do anything. That's a working condition, right? And so those sort of things, the two combined, we make it a little bit more difficult than it should be for teachers to become certified. We have teachers that have passed all of their coursework, that have successfully done their student teaching, but because they can't pass a high-stakes test called the Praxis, they're not allowed to become teachers, or they're allowed to teach, but it's substitute pay, which again is not conducive to surviving on. So I think it's a lot of things. I think also, honestly, it's the narrative that public schools are getting right now. It's the way that parents in the community negatively speak to teachers. It's a bunch of different things. I think we've got to start changing the narrative, because I do think our public schools are very successful. When our public schools are being underfunded $700 per student, based on the state's own law, our teachers are working miracles because they don't have the supplies, the supports that they have, and yet our students are successful. I don't know, it's a complicated spider web.
Thank you for that. We have another question over here.
And Lisa, thank you so much for your willingness to run. We appreciate having some schoolroom experience in that office.
Thank you.
I have two questions, actually. If you will first give us a few thoughts about your feelings of the charter schools. Is that better? Yes. Okay, your thoughts on charter schools. And then secondly, our thoughts are very much on Uvalde this week. I was in Saluda at the high school and going in an official capacity, but I was stopped at the first point of entry by a security guard who took my business card and quizzed me before I was able to go in. And I thought then, that's a much better system than all points of entry. So your thoughts on security. Is it sufficient in South Carolina from your point of view? Thank you.
Okay, so I'll answer the charter school question first. When we're talking about how kids can be successful, there's lots of different ways that kids can be successful. And not every traditional school is going to be a place of success for that child. I think that if any charter school is taking public money, then that charter school needs to be held to the same standards that public schools are being held to. That's been one of the pushes with the vouchers and the 935. To me, you've got to, first and foremost, we have got to fund our public schools. We've got to give our public schools a fighting chance to be successful. And so then once we've equitably funded those schools, then we can look at funding other aspects of education. I've seen charter schools where they're wildly successful, and then I've seen charter schools where they're not. And so, as long as you're taking that public money and offering it to charter schools, they need to be held to those same standards that public schools are held to. The second question, school safety. That is it's a really complex situation that cannot be, we talk about, and particularly when COVID hit, I think people recognize the societal issues that schools address. And that has not changed. School safety is a societal problem. Hunger is a societal problem that schools address. And so schools can't be expected, and teachers can't be expected to solve that problem on their own. We have to look at providing supports for children, especially in their young ages and as they age. And by supports, I mean your mental health. I mean your social workers, your school psychologists, because the students that are choosing and people that are choosing to come in and shoot up schools got lost along the way. And that's what I think we have to look at is addressing it that way. I think that, and this is not in the realm of superintendent of education, but we also have to look at our gun laws. We have to look at I come from a family of hunters, so I know all about gun safety, and I know, but you don't need you're not supposed to call them assault rifles anymore. I don't know what they're called, but you don't need that to hunt deer, right? Although my eye doctor said yesterday, well, you do need it to hunt hogs, and I was like, okay, I don't have any words for that. But I think that it's something that we, and parents have to be a part of that. One of the elementary schools, Sandlapper Elementary in Richland too, a 7-year-old brought a loaded gun in. I mean, that's a parent thing. So we have got to really bring all stakeholders to the table. I mean, that includes parents, that includes communities, schools, and have an honest conversation. I don't think that metal detectors are the answer to that. We just tested it at my school last Monday, and it caused more problems than it was worth, and they were at one door. Blythewood has about 6 points of entry. So it's really a complicated situation that we have to really come together with a lot of people and address. But it starts with helping kids be successful in school.
We have time for another question. Frank?
Just recently, Ted Cruz said that he wanted to arm teachers. And I've been a teacher for 30 years. And our problem, aside from arming teachers, was when teachers were forced to hand out medications. They didn't want to do it. That was a problem for them. So how do you feel about arming teachers?
I think that clearly was, Ted Cruz, bless his heart, right? People who think that that's a good idea are not teachers. Because when you think about, and there actually has been studies done about the number of decisions that teachers have to make in a school day is more than a brain surgeon makes, while they're operating. I know, and as a teacher, your focus is on 5 million different things in any given day, and you're making decision after decision. The last thing that you need to be worried about is anybody having access to a loaded gun. I teach in classes that have 28, 30, 32 students, and you're thinking about you're responsible for all of those students and in the proximity of a loaded gun. I mean, that's just, to me, when we think about terrible decisions, that is a terrible decision. And I have heard, as part of SC for Ed, we hear from teachers all the time, and they respond very quickly is that's the line in the sand, that if they are expected to not even carry a gun, but even work in a building where others are carrying a gun other than our law enforcement, that's when they're walking out the door. So I think that would really lead to, more. But I think that there is a concentrated effort to dismantle public education in this state and in this country. And it's that type of rhetoric that is leading to that. And that's part of where the narrative of those of us who are public education supporters, we need to start standing up and fighting for public education, not just teachers, but it should be parents, community, because the value of public education it's a pillar of society. We have to protect it.
Have you ever thought about collective bargaining rights for teachers and organizing?
Yes. So one of the events that SC for Ed put on in May of 2019 was the march on at the State House, where we had 10,000 public supporters show up, and we really thought that was going to be a push to help teachers, in solidarity fight and be willing to really fight for their profession. And collective bargaining is a way to do that, right? And then COVID hit, right? And it sort of, that became politicized and all of that. I think that in my opinion, I think that it can be successful, but I think that teachers can fight without having it be so formal. I mean, we've talked about SC for Ed has tried to get teachers to stand up for themselves without having to do like a formal thing. And we talked about the idea that the day after Uvalde, like that's just been one in a number of school shootings, that if your teacher stood up and said, no, we're not coming in, I mean, that's collective bargaining, right? That's us saying, no, we're powerful. We've tried to tell teachers, hey, vote in your own best interest. And so SC4Ed has been a lot of trying to teach teachers and teach public education supporters how the system works and how they can make it more successful. And that's a slow process.
Lisa, we know you have to get to another event this morning. We got time for 2 more questions.
Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for coming today. So during the pandemic, I had 2 small children who engaged in virtual education. And during that time, it became very apparent to us that there are families out there where the parents have limited proficiency in English. And also it became very apparent that there's a dearth of parental engagement in their children's education. So what are your thoughts on that, and how do you plan to address those families that are sending their children to school, but they themselves are limited proficient in English? And how do you address the issue of getting parents to be more involved, actively involved, in their children's educational process?
I can for sure speak to the limited English proficiency. That's part of the funding piece. Like when you're underfunding schools and by $700 a student, you're not able to fund your ESOL teachers or the supports or the software, and teachers for that matter, the training that general ed classroom teachers need to help address the needs of those students. I know that districts in some areas have hired, interpreters and all of that to help make the connection with the families. But that really is a funding piece to make sure that we're funding schools enough to be able to provide those services. And that's a really important service, particularly when you look at how the school report card is determined. The English language learners, they are a big component of that school report card. So if we talk about, and we can talk about the disaster that is the school report card, but then I really don't have time to talk about that. And so that to me is, you've got to have the funding in place so you can provide all of the supports and the training that teachers need. Parents are a whole other ballgame. We talk about parent involvement, and I have not met a teacher that has said, man, I just wish our parents were involved less. Like that, we beg our parents to come in and be part of the conversation and part of the experience. I teach high school, and so the issue that I had with my students a lot is that they were responsible for their younger siblings during the learning. And so my high school students, a lot of them lost out because they were too busy taking care of and making sure their younger siblings were handling the virtual okay. I think that part of the problem is that you have a disenfranchisement from people who went through K through 12. They did not have a good experience for whatever reason, and so they are hesitant to come in. And so I think that one of the things that my school really is, we're all about building relationships. That is our number one tenet of how you run a successful school, and it's building those relationships. And I think because of that, we have much more parent involvement because we have made Blythewood a welcoming place. Our students enjoy as much as they can being forced to come to school, right? I mean, they're teenagers, right? And so, you talk about, but they enjoy it. They love our teachers. They love our school principal. And that makes them, they go home with those experiences, and it creates a different idea and respect from those parents. And so I think that we have to look at how we treat the students in our school, how we treat the parents in our school, and make sure that they feel welcome and that it's a safe and supported area, and know that we are all about helping. We're all on the same page, right? We want the student to be successful. And so I think that if you communicate that, then you're probably going to get more parent support. I just don't know that you're ever going to get every parent support, but I think it's a process, and it really starts at that classroom level, that school level, and then out. And again, it's the narrative, right? When little Lisa Ellis's parents are talking about what a great experience her kid is having in school to her community or her garden club or her bingo night, that really changes the perception of what schools look like. I don't know if did I answer your question? Kind of, sort of. Okay.
Good morning. The question I have, across the state of South Carolina, a lot of school districts are adapting, not teaching the critical race theory and the 1619 Project. I think those are two ideologies that being basically saying that slavery didn't exist, slavery wasn't as bad as what it was, and it need to be clear. What is your position on making sure those ideologies and the reality of it all be taught in school districts across the state of South Carolina?
I believe wholeheartedly that all history and all perspectives should be taught in schools. When we look at the purpose of public education, it is to prepare all students for life out in the real world, life in society. And when you say, only this perspective is real, you're not preparing them for a life where they're going to encounter people who look different or act different or come from different backgrounds. And that's, when you don't have access to those experiences, you're really limiting the education of the student. We don't all share the same experiences. And that really, as frustrating as that is to be in the United States, it's one of the things that makes us really great. And so, I think about my own education a lot of years ago, even though I still think I'm 25. And it was limited in terms of the perspectives. As somebody who's a lifelong learner and a teacher for, multiple students that do not look like me, did not come from the same background, it's my responsibility to really work to educate myself. And I have become a much, a better person in reading just the different things that I've read over the last couple years. And I think we have to offer that opportunity to our students too. And also, I joke with people, when CRT became a thing, I was like, this is great, culturally relevant teaching. Yes, this is what we need to do. And then it wasn't that, it was critical race theory, which is not taught in K through 12 also. But culturally relevant teaching is the idea that your classroom looks like the students that make up your classroom. And that's what we need to be showing. My students need to see themselves in my classroom if they're going to connect to the learning. And that's what, that's where all of the perspectives come in and are so important. And really the students are my hope. Like I see my students come in and all of the issues that are on the news, we have those conversations because I teach leadership and service, right? So I have the opportunity to have those conversations and they're like, Ms. Ellis, we don't understand what the big deal is. Like, this isn't a thing. And I'm like, exactly, it's not a thing for you because you are smarter and better than the adults in the world right now. And that's what gives me hope. That's why I'm up here today, to try and make it better, a better world by making better students.
Good morning, Lisa, and thank you so much for coming to Greenwood, and welcome to Greenwood. I have one question for you. If you are elected to be the superintendent, what are the 3 priorities at the top of your list that you will implement when you get there?
Thank you for that question. So first and foremost is working with the General Assembly, or trying to work with the General Assembly on teacher and school salaries. At the same time, it is looking at what I can directly control in the Department of Education, and that's going to address more of the working conditions. So things like, this is a Department of Ed mandate. Is it working? Is it helping teachers and students? If not, it's going out the window. If the idea is good in theory, but we need to make it work better. But my ultimate question is always going to be, how is this in the best interest of students in South Carolina? And so that's how, and then the third priority for me really is safety, is school safety and of our children and our adults in the building. Because no child and no adult who takes care of children should walk into a school on any day and wonder if they're gonna walk back out, and having to make those decisions, for their students. And so to me, the immediate changes that I can make are at the Department of Ed level, looking at those working conditions, because the salary, that's a General Assembly thing, but I think we can immediately take workload off of teachers, which then makes them better able to accommodate the needs of their students because they're not having to work so hard.
Thank you very much for visiting Greenwood. We appreciate your time.
Okay. Thank you so much. I'm being told that I need to tell you my website, Lisa Ellis for scschools.org. I have literature on that table that has the website listed if you're slow to write that down like I am. Also, Sam is here with a sign-up sheet if you're interested in helping volunteer for the campaign. I would love your help. I am still on contract with my school district, so I'm still working there until the primaries. But thank you so much for the time and the great questions. I appreciate it.